A lot of real estate investors, syndicators, they have a tough time very quickly demonstrating that what they're doing is valuable because they talk in terms that maybe sounds fancy and smart, but 9 out of 10 people are like, what does that mean? So in terms of exclusivity, don't talk to me about going in cap rates. Don't talk to me about price per square foot. Talk to me in layman terms. Tell me that, hey, this building is $1 million. We bought this under $1 million under appraised value. Tell me that there's $300 per month in the rent. Tell me that it's on the corner of Main and Main where there's 10,000 cars that drive by every day. Tell me it's across the street from the VA or the hospital. Give me things that if I'm not a real estate person, I can go, you know what? That sounds interesting. That sounds valuable.
Are you about to start a podcast or producing a podcast and tired of doing the editing yourself? We have produced over 1,000 daily shows, and the production team that I've created, they're now available to produce shows for you as well. We can do as little or as much as you need, from finding and communicating with guests, preparing introductions, to editing the audio and video. You will sound better, have a more professional presence, and be able to spend your time doing other valuable tasks on your business. Let me know you're interested by emailing me directly at whitney@lifebridgecapital.com.
Raising money is difficult. It's going to take you a lot of time and effort, no doubt about it. I hear people often who try and fail, unfortunately. And we try to help them, or I try to talk through what they've done and where they've come and the effort they're putting in. And it's not an easy process. But our guest today has a system. He calls the E.A.S.Y system to raise capital for your real estate deals. And he's going to lay it out very simple. I mean, I loved how our guest today laid out his process for raising money. He's going to give you these 4 things, and we're going to talk about them in detail, each of these pieces that if you don't have, you're going to struggle to raise money. You're going to struggle speaking to investors. Our guest today is Marcin Drozdz. He's the managing partner of M1 Real Capital, where he and his team focus on acquiring value-add multifamily properties throughout the Southeast. Over the past 16 years, he has helped acquire over 1,500 units across the U.S. and established himself as a go-to in the world of capital raising and real estate acquisitions. I enjoyed this interview with Marcin. He lays out some great steps for you as somebody that's active in this space to start today and gain success in raising money and speaking with investors for your deals. I know you're going to learn a lot. Marcin, welcome to the show. Honored to have you on. Just knowing a little bit about your background, I know you are going to be able to help our listeners in a big way because many of them are trying to do the same thing you have done. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more about you. Give the listeners a little more about your background, because I think it's going to be helpful as we hear about just your experience and your expertise and what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. First of all, Whitney, thanks for having me. I took some time. I looked through your podcast. You've been doing this for quite a while. It's a lot of commitment on your part. What are you on, 12 or 1,300 episodes?
Yeah, over 1,300.
That's incredible. Yeah. So similar to yourself, I've been at this real estate thing for quite a while. I started out in private equity about, 14, 15 years ago. I've been in real estate about 16 years. And when I started in the business in a big way, it was large acquisitions, multifamily, a couple hundred doors at a time, retirement communities, 55 plus. We were buying all throughout Arizona. If you remember back in 2010, 2011, you couldn't give these properties away. Well, we were quite bullish on the asset class, and it certainly did make a lot of sense then. It makes a lot of sense now. And, over that period of time, I've had a really good opportunity to work with some really smart people and see how things are done at a much higher level than what I was used to when I was just buying my own little multifamily, properties here and there. And it's been a lot of fun. We started M1 Real Capital quite a while ago. I've put together a few different funds. We've done search funds where you put together the equity, then you find the assets. We've done special purpose entities where you raise specifically for an asset and kind of a mix of the two. And it's been a lot of fun. And when COVID first hit, like so many people, I was stuck at home and had a bunch of my buddies pepper me with questions, how to do this. And, finally my wife pleaded with me, look, you got to do something, keep yourself busy. So I started teaching and educating, and, here we are.
Awesome. Marcin, I know you have been very successful also at just working with investors and raising money. And obviously on the show, we talk about that a lot, because it's something that if you're going to buy a $10 million apartment building or 50 million, or often for most people, a $1 million apartment building, right? You're going to have to raise some money. You're going to have some investors who want to partner with you or have trust in you, right? And so that is a process that I think a lot of people take for granted, or they think it's going to be this easy thing. But you have created an easy system, to help us do this, or help the listener maybe think through how they could do this as well. Let's dive in because I know you're really good at this, and you've created a great system around that.
Yeah, it's been, and thank you for that. It's been, creating the easy system was not easy, actually, because how do you systemize, a lifetime of experience in a way that's clear and concise, right? So easy is an acronym for exclusive, abundant, scarce, and your allocation. So the E, the exclusive, is the opportunity in self. So a lot of real estate investors, syndicators, they have a tough time very quickly demonstrating that what they're doing is valuable because they talk in terms that maybe sounds fancy and smart, but 9 out of 10 people are like, what does that mean? So in terms of exclusivity, don't talk to me about going in cap rates. Don't talk to me about price per square foot. Talk to me in layman terms. Tell me that, hey, this building is $1 million. We bought this under $1 million under appraised value. Tell me that there's $300 per month in the rent. Tell me that it's on the corner of Main and Main where there's 10,000 cars that drive by every day. Tell me it's across the street from the VA or the hospital. Give me things that if I'm not a real estate person, I can go, you know what? That sounds interesting. That sounds valuable. And you have to have 3 or 4 points for your deal buttoned down that you're crystal clear on why that opportunity is exclusive and why what you're doing is valuable. So that's the E. A for abundance is making sure you have an abundance of people to talk to. So you never want to give an investor the impression that you're calling them and saying, as if you're calling them and asking for their blessing to do the deal, as if they're the one who's going to decide whether this happens or not. And there's a fine line here because you don't want to come across as arrogant, but at the same time, you want to let them know, hey, here's this tremendous opportunity. I've got 10, 20, 50 people, whatever it is, that asked me to get back to them. I thought of you on this because I thought this might be a good fit for what you told me you were looking for. So there's a clear insinuation that, hey, you've thought of them, but ultimately this deal isn't reliant on them to bless it for you, as if you need their approval. Like the insinuation should be, hey, this is a great opportunity. I'm doing this anyway. Do you want to be part of it? Right. And again, you got to walk that line. You don't want to come across as arrogant, but they need to understand that this is happening. Do you want to be a part of it? It's really important that you communicate that clearly. The S for scarcity is you need to create some urgency in the transaction without sounding like a high pressure sales guy. So, with real estate, we have 2 ways to create scarcity. One is the timing of the transaction. This thing is closing on the 30th of the month. That is a real date. That is happening. That's one form of scarcity. The other form of scarcity is the capital itself. So in other words, once you get your $500,000 or $5 million or whatever your amount is, it's done. Like we're finished. So it's really important that you can communicate that without sounding pushy. You can just say, so, as I mentioned to you, we've got X amount of people interested. We're looking to raise $3 million and we are closing in the next 45 days. By the way, one more thing for scarcity, for your closing date, and this is a freebie, don't use the same date of your actual property closing as your financial closing. When you need the equity, should not be the same day that you need to buy the property. Now, we all intuitively know this, but when you tell an investor, when they ask you when is the property closing, your answer should be whatever amount of days you think you need in between when the funds need to be in from when you're actually closing, because it's important that you don't have, when an investor hears the property closing on the 30th, they think, oh, okay, great, I can send you the money on the 29th. No, absolutely not. So it's very important that when you create that scarcity, you create the right expectations. And then finally, you'll go through the conversation, they'll have some questions, they'll talk to you about the market or something they read about in the paper, or their brother thought this, or, they think this, or whatever it is. Ultimately, you get to a point where you've exhausted a lot of the major conversation points about the opportunity, you've determined fit, and you'll say something like, look, it sounds like this may be an opportunity for you. Obviously, you've got to do your due diligence, and I'll send you all the documents and the paperwork for your accountant or your lawyer, or whoever it is that you need to review. But that said, if everything did check out, is there an amount that you'd be looking at allocating for this? And they'll tell you. I mean, if they're serious about it, they'll be like, yeah, if it all checks out, I'd probably do 100,000 or 200,000 or X amount of dollars. And then they'll tell you, my brother's got to look at it, my uncle's got to look at it, my accountant, whoever. And fair enough, they got to do their due diligence. You got to make sure they're qualified, accredited, whatever the rules are. You got to follow the rules. I get all that. But if they're not interested, they'll tell you, look, I'm just buying a cottage in the middle of selling my business, whatever. Like somebody who isn't interested it's a polite way of them being able to say, actually, this isn't a fit for me in whatever way they want to tell you. Right. So again, exclusive, abundant, scarce in your allocation. And by the way, Whitney, as you could probably tell, you could use this for real estate. You could use it for trying to get a tech company funded. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, this process will give you at least a starting point to move a conversation forward.
Elaborate. We'll go through a couple of these because this is great. I love how you've broken this down in layman's terms, even for us. So it's like, okay, have I created this type of offering? In what I have in my deal or when I'm talking to investors. So exclusive. Talk to me in layman's terms. You said 3 or 4 points. It's so wise, and I love the even don't tell me about cap rates and all these things that can. Man, if you're brand new to passive investing, you're going to be run off, right? I mean, I'm already so confused, or I don't feel. If I'm confused, the answer is no, right? So speak a little bit about the exclusive side of that and how you do that, or how you do that in your deals.
Sure. I'll give you one from last summer because it probably really accentuates the point well. We bought in Memphis, Tennessee. We bought 178 doors. And about 2/3 of the building was empty. And it was a huge value add, heavy lift reno job. And most of my investors on that particular partnership came from Canada. So to put things into context, we bought 178 doors for under $4 million, which is cheap by anyone's standards. So for me to demonstrate exclusivity, I forget what it was per door. It was less than 30 a door, whatever it was, 20 something a door. It was insane. So when I talked to my buddies up in Canada where houses are starting at $1 million plus, my comment was, how much do you spend on renovating your kitchen? Okay, great. We pay less than that per apartment. Like you make it relatable, right? So my pitch to my buddies or to potential investors was we're buying 178 doors for under $4 million. So you could either do that with me or you could buy 10 doors in Toronto. Which would you rather do? And I'm oversimplifying. I'm grossly oversimplifying, right? But it's super relatable because, you could spend $400,000 to buy 10 or 12 or 15 apartments in downtown Toronto, wherever the investor is, compared to potentially owning 15 times the amount of properties, right? So it's a really simple conversation to have. So that was a major point. Another point was that it was right down the street from the FedEx airport terminal at Memphis International. They employ 30,000 people. Those jobs aren't going anywhere. FedEx has spent billions of dollars ingraining themselves in the community there. They're never going anywhere. Those jobs are there. Like that is their head office, right? And the other piece was it's right off Airways Boulevard, which has, I think, a traffic count of 50,000 cars a day. So, and the final thing was if I did want to rebuild this property today from scratch, I'd spend over $20 million plus the dirt. So all of those things combined to somebody who's just listening goes, oh, okay, that rationally, I understand how you got there. Like that makes sense. Obviously, they're going to have more questions, but at least you have my attention.
And that comes across so much more. A way to build trust as well, right? I can relate to all those things you just mentioned. Even if I'm brand new to apartments, I know you need large employers like FedEx or, like that makes me feel better about my investment, right? Those things you just said versus confusing me.
I could have said, hey, the going in cap rate is like 9% in the market, and we're going to be able to bring it up to like a 16% cap. And then we're going to be able to stabilize at a 6%. But you and I understand what that means, but most of my buddies, even if they've bought and sold companies or they're successful business people, they know their stuff. They're not in the game that we're in. So talk to me in a language that I understand.
What about the abundant? How do you create that?
Well, so creating abundance is a function of demonstrating value in a public setting. So for example, you do this really well with your podcast. you demonstrate value, you are somebody who adds value to your network by bringing people like myself and other people on to teach your audience and your network about various parts of real estate. Other people might be able to do it through a newsletter. Some people can do it through videos on YouTube or Instagram or whatever it is. And for somebody who's not generally comfortable either on video or audio, like I said, you could write articles, you could write blog posts, you could comment on other people's posts and have an informed opinion on things. The point is creating an abundance in the investor space is a function of you being able to demonstrate value. This isn't the environment of manipulation and, tricking people into doing things. Look, the world is too small for that with the internet today, first and foremost. And secondly, people invest with people they like and they trust and they think they're competent. So demonstrating competence creates abundance because people start to look to you for, well, what does Whitney think? What does Marson think about this? And then they start to seek you out in your opinion. And there's value in that. And, through that, when you create an abundance of people to talk to, when you do have an opportunity and you want to share it with your network, you do have the ability to, you have a much broader network of people to talk to. And that's really important. And ultimately, when you're dealing with investors, being able to subtly demonstrate that by mentioning it is implied that this is happening and like, I'm going to get this done regardless kind of thing. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
When you started this business, you started raising money for your deals. How did you get in front of an abundance of people? What was your path?
Well, like anybody else, you gotta start from scratch. And when I first got into PE, it was a lot of phone calls, a lot of trying to host seminars and opportunities and teaching people about real estate, the benefits of commercial real estate. A lot of giving. It was a lot. Ultimately, the first 3 to 5 years was a tremendous amount of giving because you're trying to establish credibility and a track record in the marketplace. Also, it helps if you're earlier in your career that you hitch your wagon to somebody else that is a proven entity. Because I've had people come to me and say, "Hey, I want to raise $1 million," and I say, "Great, what have you done?" Well, I bought a house 3 years ago and now I want to buy another one and I want to do it with people's money. I go, "Great, but you're going to have a tough time getting somebody who's sophisticated to invest with you if you've never had an investment property." So, if you want to learn that skill set, you'd be better off either being an LP or working as a GP in someone else's deal and earning your stripes, because you do need to build that credibility early on. I did it by working in PE. I literally raised tens of millions of dollars for deals I had no stake in, just to learn the business, the trade, the crafts, get the contacts, and build the confidence.
Awesome. You do have to get started somehow, right? Mm-hmm. And that credibility, is not something that comes easy. You do just have to get started one way or another. And you gave some great options there. I've seen work for so many people, including myself. And so, Marcin, we'll shift gears just a little bit. But tell me about maybe the biggest challenge in your business, over the last 12 to 18 months.
So the biggest challenge for me, I think, has been transitioning to Zoom world because I'm accustomed to catching 50 to 75 flights a year. I'm used to getting on a plane, going to meetings, and I don't mean it as a negative challenge. It's actually a blessing in disguise because right now we're at the beach, we're doing this podcast, and it's the social norm to be able to connect through Zoom today. Whereas pre-COVID, we had Skype and we had GoToMeeting webinar and all this stuff. But if I ever insinuated to one of my clients or prospects, "Hey, let's meet on whatever the Zoom equivalent was 3 years ago," they would have said, well, why? Like, I don't understand. Like, you can come to our office, right? So it's a blessing in disguise. I had a tough time with it initially because I enjoy meeting people and I'm still go out of my way to do it. But the fact that we can now do this remotely, it's also created an opportunity for sharing more information.
What about deal flow or raising money? What's been the most difficult recently?
So most recently, the capital raising side has always been something that's come naturally for us. I have people texting me all the time, "Hey, I just sold a company. Hey, I got this. Hey, I got that." So that doesn't seem to be a problem. Doing deals that I'm excited about is You need to get more creative, as I'm sure you know that on your end too, Whitney. So, we've gone downstream to do things a little bit heavier value add now, as opposed to before. We were able to do more of the light to medium reno value add stuff. Today, we're doing a lot more medium to heavy down to the studs value add. And, there's more opportunity there, but it extends your cycles out a little bit further, but ultimately the returns are commensurate. But I guess if I had to pick, it's the deal flow has certainly become more challenging. But at the same time, I'm finding a lot of people that maybe came into the business when it was easy and never saw the tough part. I'm seeing a lot of those people whining right now. And that makes me very happy, because that means that they were just here for a good time, not for a long time. Right.
What about predictions that you may have for the real estate market over the next 6 to 12 months? And what's changing in your business based on those things? Well,
look, I mean, and you understand this, there's over 300 MSAs throughout the US. So, any prediction is obviously specific. Sure. It's very difficult to make a broad market prediction, but I mean, broadly speaking, look, I follow a lot of economists and I listen to a lot of different schools of thought and things like this. Ultimately, what I see is, from an underwriting standpoint, traditionally, we would never factor in more than 1 or 2% rent growth. It was just irresponsible. Today, because inflation is running red hot, 7, 10, whatever numbers you believe, and it doesn't look like it's going to be cooling off anytime in the future, the only way that you can do deals today is if you believe that inflation will be persistent. Because if you believe it'll be persistent, you have to relook at your market rent growth. I mean, you can't do 1, 2% and make deals make sense anymore. So the hardest part for me was to overcome the limiting belief of, hey, maybe rents will grow 2, 3, or 4% per year on a consistent basis because of what we're seeing in inflation. So my prediction will be that inflation is going to continue for years and years and years. We haven't seen this. And the other side of the coin is, you talk about the Fed raising rates. Well, right. Goldman Sachs put out a study that they're going to raise rates. I think it was 10 times over the course of 2022. Okay, well, 10 times a quarter point is 2.5 points. I mean, that sounds like a lot, but it brings you back up to historic averages. So I don't know if it's enough. Like, I'm not an economist, but how do you kill 8 or 10% inflation unless you make the cost of borrowing more expensive than what the money is being depreciated by? And I don't see rates going that high. So I just think we're going to have more inflation, and I can't think of a better asset class than safe, clean, affordable rental housing, and that's where we're betting quite heavily.
When you're purchasing an asset right now, how do you prepare for a potential downturn, or maybe the unexpected, right? Or maybe, the boilers go out and I don't know, there's a water problem, there's like numerous unexpected things. What are you doing in your underwriting or due diligence that's saying, we're prepared for things that we don't even know that could happen?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, if you're buying assets where you have an expectation that your rents are going to increase exponentially, you're already inheriting risk in the future today, that you're building that into your model, and that is one form of risk. There's two things you can do. You can control your expectations for income and really try to control your expenses as much as possible. So looking at long-term fixed debt is really important, even if you pay a slight premium for it, if you can lock in your debt for an extended period of time. And again, if you have a buy and hold mentality, refi till you die, like Jason Hartman says, which is what we do, then you're not worried about long-term debt, because you're not worried about the buyout penalties, because your plan is to hold regardless. So that's one major thing to do. The other thing too is, and again, this could be contentious in some from some perspectives, but I avoid the sexy markets, the Miamis, the major rent growth, exponential increase, into the moon, rent prices where people are paying $2-3 a month rent. I mean, look, will that continue? Maybe, but I know one thing's for sure. If I'm charging $800 or $1,200 for a 2-bed, 2-bath in a market where their median income more than supports that today and into the future, even with a modest rent increase. As long as, like I said, FedEx keeps putting those planes on the runways, and as long as people are working in those warehouses with those good blue collar jobs, to me, I feel pretty confident that those sectors are going to be much more resilient. And then when you factor in the replacement cost of everything, like you can't build the stuff that I'm buying for what I'm buying it for and renovating it for. So even if, for whatever reason, somebody else wanted to compete, well, I mean, my God, you'd have to spend more than double what I've spent. And yeah, you'll have a new building, fair enough, but the tenants aren't going to pay you double just because you have brand new counters.
What's your best source for meeting new investors right now?
So Whitney, I've been at this for 16 years. I hate to give you the cliche answer, referrals, but that's really what it is. At this point in my life, I have so many people trying to work with us that I need to find good places for us to be invested first. And unfortunately, sometimes that means people go elsewhere with their money, and that's okay too.
Yeah, that's a good place to be in. What are some of the most important metrics that you track?
In which context?
You can use that any way you want. I ask it that way on purpose. So, what's the most important to you? It could be something personal. It could be in business as well.
My wife's happiness.
A good answer. That's a good answer. Okay. Now, what about business or personal outside of wife happiness?
Sure. So that is the most important metrics for anybody who's married. If, happy wife, happy life. I didn't understand that until I got married. And yes, it is the most important KPI. As far as business goes, on the real estate side, look, you've got, if you're on the asset management side, any fluctuations in your major line items on the revenue side or expense side are things that you should pay attention to. So if you have any major deviation occurring in your gross potential rent and your operating expenses, that men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. And ultimately, if you're looking at your financial statements, knowing how to read financial statements for real estate investors is probably the most understated skill set that I don't hear a lot about at many of the podcasts or platforms. And really being a great asset manager and a custodian of somebody else's capital is understanding how to read financial statements. And for me, looking at quarterly and annual statements and seeing the deviation, the percentages change in revenue or expenses, that typically uncovers the story and the conversation that I need to have with my respective property manager, asset manager, or potentially look at myself and see what we could realign.
Yeah, great advice. Give us just quickly, if somebody's thinking, man, financial statements, I don't even know where to start. What would you tell them to start to better understand how to read financial statements?
Well, so look, the one advice I would have given myself if I was to, because I didn't finish the secondary education thing because I went off to start buying buildings because I was in school. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and school, I didn't relate to it. I dropped out and I started buying buildings and kind of self-taught. But the one thing I would have done differently in hindsight is I would have taken accounting in college or university just to understand the difference between an income statement, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flows. Because as a real estate investor, if you don't understand the flow of funds on the income and expense side and assets and liabilities more than just contextually, then you're going to have a harder time scaling a business. I had a business in my early 20s making millions of dollars in revenue, but the more we sold, the more broke I was personally. And it made no sense to me. And, it wasn't until I lost a couple $1 million personally on that business that I was like, what the hell's going on? How come as I grow this thing, I have less cash? And it's because at that point, I still didn't know how to read the financial statements. So, the starting point, honestly, go take an accounting, just even a basic on Udemy or some of these online classes, just take $100 or $500 or whatever it is and understand the 3 different statements. Because as a starting point, that will give you a lot of context over how things work. And you stop doing this bank account accounting, which a lot of people are guilty of doing.
Such wise advice. I would like to do that myself. It's just doing it a lot to get more comfortable with that, at understanding financial statements. But I still have a long ways to go, right? But we hire and build teams that can help even in that front, right? Hiring those people that do have an accounting background and whatnot, so that they can see things that I can't.
Well, and Whitney, that's actually a really good point. The alternative is if you do have access to an accountant or a CFO that has the patience, or if they're working for you full time, make sure that they take the time to walk you through the three statements and how things loop through the three. So things like understanding the impact of accelerated depreciation, amortization, all the different non-cash expenses, just understanding all that and recapture and how things work, because you'll you'll learn the difference between a really good deal and a financially engineered, really good looking deal, which is another difference. And we could do a podcast on that altogether as well.
We should do that. No doubt about it. Unfortunately, we are running low on time right now, but I'd love to have you back, Marcin, to talk about some of those things specifically. A couple quick questions though, before we do have to go is give us some daily habits that you are disciplined about that have helped you achieve this level of success.
I get up at 5 a.m. and I try to meditate every morning. I don't do it. I try to meditate every morning. It's something that I'm consistently trying to get better at. But the thing I do is I do stretch. I do work out. I get that out of the way first thing. For those of you who are listening and you can't see this, I'm a plus size model. I am not built to run. I am built, fight or flight. I'm going to be the guy that fights. I'm not going to be the guy that runs. So because running is I can't detest running more, and I do it because of that. And I get it out of the way first thing. I run my, 2 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, whatever I feel like running that day. And I get it out of the way and I feel fantastic. So that is, and it gives me the confidence to handle anything else, because at that point, everything is just easier. So I do the thing I hate first thing in the morning. And the other major habit for me is acknowledging wins. So when I was in my 20s, even my early 30s, I would never allow myself to stop and smell the roses, so to speak, or be happy. I would always say, oh yeah, when we buy this building, I'll be happy. Okay, then we bought the building. Okay, great. Move on. Okay, next thing. Okay, and then we do that thing. Okay, yeah, okay, great. So I would never acknowledge the thing that just happened and what it took to get it done. And I'd never kind of just acknowledge that and celebrate that success. And what ended up happening in my 20s to my 30s, life just literally went like this. And I woke up and I'm like, why am I freaking miserable all the time? Look at all this cool stuff. And it was because I never took the time to acknowledge it along the way. So today I acknowledge and try to celebrate the small wins along the way.
Wise, very wise advice. If you could pick one thing that's contributed to your success, what would that be?
So there's a book that I really resonate with, and I'll share it with you. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's written by a guy named Ryan Holiday. It's rooted in philosophy called Stoicism, which was really popular in the Roman Empire, and it's kind of faded. But Stoicism is essentially the thought process that nothing happens to you, everything happens for you. So in other words, you're dealt a certain hand of cards, and ultimately what you do with that matters more than what you actually received. And for me, that's been the biggest change throughout my 20s into my 30s, hopefully going into my 40s here, because ultimately, life's not fair. Things happen. People will cross you. Things will happen. And ultimately what you do with it matters more than what happened.
I've not read that book yet. It's been in my wish list for a while. So it's one I've heard recommended a few times. I appreciate you sharing that. And how do you like to give back?
So the Inner Circle that we have, the educational platform that we do with M1 Inner Circle is a lot of fun for me. I mean, there are some costs there for students to join, but really for me, it's I enjoy the teaching. I enjoy the educational side. That to me is a lot of fun. Especially the students that are, just that having those light bulb moments is, I got a text from a student literally yesterday. She said, I've accomplished more in the last 2 weeks than I did in the last 2 years. Thank you. I was like, that's awesome. Like for me, that is just beautiful, because that next house or next small apartment building she buys is, that may be the difference between her quitting her 9 to 5 or not.
Yeah. Wow. Marcin, it's been an honor to meet you, have you on the show. You've shared so much with the listeners in a short period of time that I know that today they can take action on the things that you laid out and see success, right? I mean, you laid it out very clearly in layman's terms and very well. And I hope that will resonate with many of them. I know it will, but I hope that they'll really apply that to their business. And as they're talking to investors and as they're learning about these opportunities, man, you've really helped them today. Marcin, how can they get in touch with you or learn more about M1?
Sure. Yeah. So m1realcapital.com is the real estate side of the business. And for people that want to learn more about what we do with our buildings, you can go there. The other side of the business, if somebody's active building their own real estate investing portfolio, actually I have a free mini course on the E.A.S.Y system on my website at marcindrozdz.com. You can put that in your show notes because the spelling, there's a few Z's in there. They can go there. They can download the free mini course for free at my website. And yeah, we've got tons of resources there as well. So.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.